That's what the men said. That's what the remaining disciples and the others who were with them, that's how they responded when the women came and shared their experiences they had just had. And why wouldn't they? What else should they have said? What would you have said if you had just watched your teacher, your friend, your hope for the world be nailed to a cross and forced to die a most inhumane death? Jesus had been crucified. He was dead. The tomb was sealed. It was over. But what if it isn't? As Luke shares the story of Jesus, he begins with telling us of an angel proclaiming good news, a miracle, to a woman. Gabriel tells Mary, "The Lord is with you." And now, towards the close of the story, Luke tells us of two angels proclaiming good news, a miracle, to a group of women, telling them, "The Lord is still with you." These women, Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and others who we don't get to know all of their names, they were there the entire time. They had traveled with Jesus. They ate with him. They listened to him teaching, and they talked with him. And they were there when Jesus predicted his death, though it might not have sunk in. It might have kind of gone in one ear and out the other. Because let's face it, most of us aren't really fond about talking to someone about their impending death. It's not comfortable. It's not pleasant. It marks the end of something, and these women did not want to imagine the end of their time with Jesus. But then Jesus was arrested, and he was crucified just as he had predicted. These women refused to leave his side. No matter how painful it might have been, they stayed. And when Jesus took his last breath, when it was finished, they made arrangements that as soon as the Sabbath was over, they would go and anoint his body, because that's what family does. One final act of love. That morning, early morning, well, it might have still been dark out, as the women were walking to the tomb, they were expecting to find a corpse. What else should they have expected? But instead, they were encountered by these angels, by these dazzling messengers who reminded them, yes, Jesus had predicted his death and his crucifixion and his arrest. But that wasn't all. Jesus had promised that he would rise again. Had they forgotten? Had they just not really believed him at the time? Or maybe they hadn't understood because there they were, standing with spices for his body. But what if it's true? If it's true, they didn't need these spices anymore. And as they look around, the world looks like a whole new place. Everything began to make sense. All that Jesus had ever taught or said or did just fell into place. And these women had a sparkle in their eye and a spring in their step as they went off to share the good news with the others. When they were all gathered there, it was interesting. All these people who had been with Jesus throughout his ministry, side by side, watching him heal people, watching him feed 5,000 people from crumbs, watching him raise the dead. Not one of them was expecting this. Not one of them said, on the third day, right on time, just like Jesus said, I knew this was happening.
Right on time, right, Lord.
No, none of them. But I don't know that we can blame this group of men and women for thinking this was ludicrous. We might have if we were there. But Peter wondered, what if? And he went off to seek the empty tomb. We who are gathered here today, we have heard the good news. We have heard this account of the resurrection with our own ears. Just as the women first heard it with their ears. And the disciples and others heard it with their ears. And there may be some who have some lingering doubts, who have that whispering, utter nonsense, crazy talk, baloney. Unbelief is simply the belief that death is final, the end. There's no reason to risk. There's nothing to hope for. The dead stay dead, and there's nothing more to it. But what if there is? What if it's true? What if Jesus did exactly as he promised he would do? What if Jesus did defeat death? What if all the rules have been broken? Well, then when we look around, we can see that this world looks a whole lot different. And the good news that Jesus defeated death is not a one-time in history occurrence. The good news is that Jesus is present in our lives today. The Lord is with us, alive and active every day. Jesus is with us in our messiness, in our grief, in our anxiety, our loneliness, our broken places. Jesus is with us in our guilt, in our emptiness, in our thirst for justice and our hunger for righteousness. And Jesus comes to us in love and washes us and brings us healing, fills us, feeds us, makes us holy and new. and gives us resurrection every day. Our certainty of death has been challenged. We are called to embrace this message of new life. Because even if we haven't seen with our own eyes, we have heard with our own ears. We have heard the good news. And just as Peter went seeking the empty tomb, we seek and find Jesus in the water, in the bread, in the wine, just where he promises he will be. And we have felt resurrection in our lives. What if it's true? Well, then we have a God who loves us enough to go through death for us. And just as the tomb could not contain Jesus, we cannot contain this amazing grace. We are compelled to live out the mandate that Jesus gave us to love one another as he has loved us, to share the good news with our lives, and to shout it out with joy from every fiber of our beings. He is risen.
He is risen.